Welcome again to Joe Stunner Boxing. How are you doing? I hope you're doing well. A lot of people have sort of commented on Anthony Joshua's, quote unquote resurrection, and that sort of picturesque knockout he scored against Francis Ngannou, and AJ's back and all the rest of it, like he'd never really been away. But okay, good result. And I think when you consider that, he had those back-to-back losses with Usyk. No shame in losing twice to Usyk on points. Usyk is a truly brilliant talent. But he did have the meltdown in the ring and so on and so forth. And the fact that he's come back last year with 3 great wins and now he's knocked out Ngannou to start 2024, terrific effort by Joshua. But even he has to take second place in the comeback stakes to the man I want to talk about in this video, because I think Joseph Parker deserves absolutely enormous credit for what he's done. I really do. There's no doubt that him and Andy Lee hooking up was a great move, really terrific move. And if you go back to earlier in his career, Joseph Parker's career, let's go back, 8-9 years ago, say, for the sake of argument, when he was beating people like Cali Meehan on, third round stoppage, and Bowie Tupou, he knocked him out in a round, and, not great opponents, but he was coming through and people were saying, yeah, this New Zealand guy can fight a bit, And then he worked his way towards a, world title shot. He also got a win over Carlos Takam, which was a very, very good result at the time. That was a unanimous decision. Takam at the time was 33 wins, two defeats and 1 draw, I think it was. And then he beat Alexander Dmytrenko, who had a similar, I think he had 38 wins, two defeats at the time, stopped him in 3. And that set the table for the Andy Ruiz fight. And he won a majority decision to win the WBO heavyweight title. I think I'm right in saying he's the only New Zealander to ever hold any version of the heavyweight title. A lot of people thought Ruiz won that fight. And it was close. 2 of the cards, I think, were 115, 113, and one had it 140, 114. So it could have gone either way. It was in Auckland, in New Zealand, and Joseph Parker got the decision. And then he had a couple of defences. One was against Hughie Fury, which was a snooze fest. And Kajanu, I can't remember the guy's first name, he beat him over 12. That was a unanimous decision. The Hughie Fury fight, by the way, was a majority decision. People forget that. That was Mick Hennessy's infamous shades of Ali to describe Hughie Fury. Yeah, he was so peeved when Hughie lost that to Joe. And then he fought Anthony Joshua, and he made it not really competitive. I mean, Joshua won most of the rounds, but I think it was the manner in which he lost, even though he went the distance with Joshua and didn't look to be in any trouble. It was kind of disappointing in the way he surrendered that title. And then his following fight was against Dillian Whyte, which was he lost a unanimous 12-round decision, although he almost had Whyte out of there. He floored him in the final round, and Whyte was flagging badly. And Parker himself was on the floor twice. It was an early round, second or third round. Whyte threw himself out. There was a clash of heads, and Parker went down. And so he said he was concussed for a few rounds, or sort of concussed. And I can believe that, because it was a nasty head clash. Put him over. It was counted. He was over again in the 9th. But like I say, once he kind of reset his the grey matter that was rattling around in the skull, he actually was coming on strong in those last 3 rounds and nearly had Whyte out of there. So to me, that showed a bit more grit and determination, that even though it was a defeat, than the Joshua defeat. Because even though he went the distance with Joshua, who was knocking everyone out at the time, it's kind of like he was almost content to go the distance. With Whyte, he actually fought him, and he showed a bit of spite. And after that, he strung together a load of wins against lower level people like Shaundell Winters. I think he did him in 5, and Alex Lepai was done in 10. And then there was that incredible snooze fest with Junior Farr. I mean, Junior Farr took Joe the 12-round distance. One of those cards was 115, 113. Way, way, way too close, because Parker is leagues ahead of Junior Farr. No disrespect to Junior Farr. He ain't a bad fighter. But come on, man, Joe should be getting rid of him. And then he separated from Kevin Barry as his trainer and hooked up with Andy Lee. And I thought that's an intriguing move. Now, no doubt this is connected to the fact that Joseph Parker is good friends with Tyson Fury. Andy Lee is a cousin of Fury's of some sort. And I believe it was Fury that suggested that Parker should hook up with Lee. I could be wrong about that. And there's no doubt the first Derek Chisora fight, because their first two fights together were both against Derek Chisora. The first one, Joe got floored in the opening seconds, won a decision, which was a split decision. And a lot of people disputed that. They said, no, they thought Chisora won. And yeah, you can certainly make a case for that. Certainly make a case. But of course, Joseph Parker and Andy Lee had only been together for a little while. The rematch, far more conclusive. Chisora was, I think he was counted in the fourth, the fifth, or the fourth, the seventh, and the eighth, or something like that. There were 3 knockdowns, and Chisora was all but stopped. He had the crap beaten out of him, absolutely smashed to bits. And yeah, there were rounds when Chisora, would come forward and would almost try to out-hustle Parker. I'm thinking in the earlier rounds. And even though he was going on the floor, Derek's a warhorse. Derek is a tough man. And, he did his best. He did his best. It weren't enough. And Joe won that fight. Next up was Joe Joyce. And we know what happened there. Parker was being beaten up badly in the opening few rounds. I thought this is going to be an early night. He hung tough. He was coming in heavier during these fights as well. The two Chisora, certainly the second Chisora one, and in particular the Joe Joyce one, he came in heavier, much bigger than he'd previously been. Because he was normally like 230, something like that, in the 230s. Now he was coming in the sort of mid to high 240s, put on a bit of flab, a bit more weight, and wasn't quite the speed demon that he had been in the past, or when the mood took him anyway. It wasn't all a case of box. There was a bit more, there was a lot more counter punching, but there was also some decent boxing on the back foot, putting together a bit of weight behind the punch. Maybe that's why he put on a stone or so. I don't know. But certainly against against Joyce in the early rounds, he was getting battered. But he did hang tough. Still gave Joyce something to think about. But in the 11th round, he was knocked flat by a huge left hook to the chin. He'd also been cut over the right eye, and so but he showed some resiliency, some toughness. It's just that Joyce looked to me to be too big for him. Now that knockout was bad. It came off, like I say, the back of the 2 Chisora victories. Derek himself had seen better days, but still had a little bit left. Joyce was flying. That was by far his best victory to date. And Joe had to go back to the beginning with Andy Lee and rebuild. And this is where the fun starts. Because in the Joe Joyce fight was in September of 2022. In 2023, Joe had 4 fights. And he started off, again, not particularly impressively at all. He was taken 10 rounds by Jack Massey. But the thing is, when you consider that the first Chisora fight was in May of 2021, right, and the Jack Massey fight was in, I think, January of 2023, that's 20 months, roughly 19, 20 months. That's kind of the time you need with a new trainer to work on things, for things to become second nature. So despite the Joe Joyce knockout loss, and the 2 Chisora fight, the first one was, again, you could have given it to Chisora. Despite that, what was going on behind the scenes with Andy Lee and Joe it was gradually paying dividends. Things were getting done. Things were being worked on. Suddenly the extra weight seemed a bit more, his body adapted. These things take time, in other words. And it would have been easier for Joe Joyce, for Joe Parker to say after the Joe Joyce fight, it's not working out with Andy Lee. But he stuck with him because clearly there's some sort of synergy between the two, you know what I mean? So the Jack Massey fight, he didn't look that impressive. Won a 10-round decision, but they dominated. Boy, I thought he won most of the rounds, probably 7 or 8 of the rounds, but wasn't particularly impressive. Then he had a guy called Apollo, I forget the guy's first name. That was a one-round knockout, and that was back in, I don't think it was in New Zealand, I think it was in Melbourne, Australia. And then we come to Simon Keane. All of these are in 2023. Simon Keane, 23 wins, 1 defeat. Joe knocks him out in 3 rounds. And suddenly you're thinking, he showed a bit of spite there. He showed a bit of, like, okay, he's got a guy who's a league below him or two. I'm going to get rid of him pretty damn quick. Which he did. He did that. He went in there and he kind of smashed the guy up and got rid of him quick. And you're thinking, that's interesting. Okay. I thought that was his best performance for a long, long time, even though Simon Keane isn't a world-class heavy. Again, as I've said many, many times before, sometimes it's how you get your work done, Which brings us to Deontay Wilder. And everybody wrote off Joe Parker and said, hey, nothing, He's had these 3 wins this year. He's come back quite well from Joe Joyce, but every time he fights someone who's anywhere near world level, he either bottles it and just sticks with going the distance, or, he loses convincingly. Deontay should deal with him. And Deontay Wilder was supposed to be fighting Anthony Joshua. That was all, rubber stamped. What happened? This was for the a couple of intercontinental belts, WBC and WBO. So it was a 12-rounder. And there you go. Joe dominated him. Joe absolutely dominated Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder didn't get near him. On one of the cards, it was a whitewash, 120, 108. I think the others were like 118, 110 or something like that. Deservedly so. Wilder, bizarre tactics, bizarre fight. Joe was a little bit reticent at the start, just respecting the right-hand power. But as after 4 rounds, started to get a bit more confident, a little bit more cavalier, and basically dominated Wilder. And afterwards, Andy Lee said, he said before the fight, we're expecting a stoppage win, which people raised their eyebrows at. Afterwards, he said, yeah, I'm disappointed he didn't stop him. And he could have done with a little bit more fire. But nevertheless, he did show some good come-forward skills, Joe Parker. Real coming out party, a real rebirth, if you like, after that shattering loss to Joe Joyce. And then, of course, having beaten Wilder, only the second man to do so, he fights Zhilei Zhang, who is coming off 2 knockout wins over the man who knocked Joe Parker flat. And we know about Zhang, 291 pounds, I think he was when he came in, enormous man, 292 pounds, something like that. 6'6", but a very questionable gas tank. And if he hits hard, Zhang hits bloody hard. There's no doubt about it. And he had Joe down twice, once in round 3, once in round 8. The round 3 knockdown it didn't stun him, but it had an effect because there was a cut over on the bridge of Joe's nose, a lot of blood coming out of his mouth. You were thinking, this is looking a bit ominous. But he bit down on his gum shield. He showed some grit, some determination, some of that, Maori spirit that he tries to channel. Went over again in the 8th from a chopping right hand when he was on the ropes, got up, weathered the storm, came back. And in the final 4 rounds, yeah, the man was doing some damage. The man was doing some serious damage. And Zhang did not land a single punch in the final round, which was absolutely bizarre because, not to land a single punch. He was exhausted. He was shattered, absolutely shattered. And yeah, that was the 5th win on the bounce. He's now got wins over back-to-back Deontay Wilder and Zhilei Zhang, 2 big names. Certainly Zhang, even though he's 40, Zhang was, fancied to, again, beat Parker. Wilder, pushing 40. Only man who beaten him was Tyson Fury. Joe dealt with him. I mean, these are good wins. The Zhang win was only a majority decision. And I actually had that fight a draw, 113-113. I had it 7 rounds to Joe, but 2 10-8s for Zhang make it even, 113-113. And I know a few people thought Zhang won it, despite losing the later rounds. I think Chris Andre said in his review that he thought Zhang had won it. I thought it was close, but I don't begrudge Joe the win. I mean, Joe Parker has gone from being someone who, whenever I'd hear his name, I'd go, yeah, whatever, to someone I now want to see fight, to someone I think is a good, genuine heavyweight who bear in mind, I mean, the guy is only, I think, 32, which is not old for a heavyweight. He seems to have been around forever. But the way he's come back and the way he's put himself back into the mix, in the argument with the elite fighters, the way he's earned a world title shot by beating Zhang and Wilder, you can't argue with that. I've got a lot of respect for Joseph Parker. So big up the Kiwi. I'm sure they're very proud of him in New Zealand. Yeah. What do you think of Joe Parker? Leave those comments below. I really like the guy. Tell me who you think he should fight next. That's an interesting question. How far do you think he can go? Do you think if he was, let's say, for example, he was to fight the winner of Usyk and Fury? I don't know whether he'd fight Fury because he's a mate. Do you think he'd stand a chance against either Fury or Usyk? What about Filip Hrgovic? What about Anthony Joshua, a rematch? Leave your comments below. Let me know what you think. And as always, thanks for your time. Please subscribe to the channel if you're new. Leave your comments below and hit the like button as well, that little like thing, because they count them apparently. All right, ladies and gentlemen, appreciate your time as always. Looking forward to reading what you got to say, and catch you later. Bye for now.